When I finally admitted to my husband that I had been faking my attraction to him for years, I expected anger. I expected shouting. But what he said next shattered me completely. I thought I was doing the right thing by choosing stability over passion. I convinced myself love would grow. But secrets like that, they don't just break hearts, they destroy entire lives. I'm Nicole, 32, and this is the story of how my marriage fell apart. Not because of cheating, not because of abuse, but because I finally said out loud what I had been hiding for years. I was never attracted to my husband. Not even once. 5 years ago, I was barely keeping it together. Bartending at a local brewery in Madison, Wisconsin, struggling to raise my 2-year-old son, Jadon, alone. His father, a complete deadbeat who ghosted the moment I told him I was pregnant. I was drowning in bills, exhausted, and desperate for stability. That's when Franklin walked into my life. He wasn't my type, stocky build, dad sneakers, the kind of guy who laughed at his own bad jokes. But he was kind. He listened when I talked instead of staring at my chest like most guys did. The first time he met Jadon was by accident. My sitter canceled, and I had no choice but to bring my son to work. Franklin walked in, saw Jadon peeking from behind the bar, and instead of being weird about it, he smiled. Within minutes, he had Jadon giggling, drawing silly faces on napkins. Most men ran the second they found out I had a kid. But Franklin, he leaned in. That moment, I told myself, maybe this is what love is supposed to be, maybe attraction grows over time. We started dating, and Franklin was perfect on paper. He had a stable job, owned a house, and treated Jadon like his own. My friends kept telling me how lucky I was, how I had hit the jackpot. So when he proposed, at home, with Jadon holding the ring, his little voice saying, "Mommy, say yes," I did. I convinced myself that love wasn't just about passion. It was about security, family, and choosing the right kind of man. On our wedding day, I smiled in photos, cried happy tears when Franklin adopted Jadon. But deep down, I knew the truth. Every time he kissed me, every time he touched me, I had to force myself to respond. I told myself it didn't matter, that I could live with it. I was wrong. Because secrets like that, they don't stay buried forever. And when the truth finally came out, it didn't just break my marriage, it shattered everything. For the first few years, I played my part well. The grateful wife. The reformed party girl who finally chose wisely. I smiled in photos, posted cute anniversary messages, told other single moms how lucky I was. But behind closed doors, it was different. At first, I convinced myself that attraction would come with time. That physical desire wasn't as important as having a man who loved me and my son. But every time Franklin touched me, every time he kissed me, I felt nothing. I started avoiding intimacy. Little things at first, going to bed early, claiming headaches, pretending to be asleep when he came to bed. Franklin noticed, of course, but he never pushed. If anything, his patience made it worse. He thought I was just tired, stressed. He had no idea that the real reason I turned away every night was because being with him felt like an obligation, not a desire. And then, things started changing. Franklin got promoted to senior project manager, a great step for his career, but it meant more time in the office, more client dinners, more stress. At first, I was happy. The raise meant more security, vacations, a bigger savings account. But with the new job came something else. Franklin started gaining weight. It started small, his shirts getting a little tighter, his face a little rounder. But soon it was impossible to ignore. His once stocky frame softened, his belly grew, and worst of all, he developed man boobs. I know how awful that sounds, but I couldn't help it. I started cringing when he walked around shirtless. I avoided looking at him when he changed. I even found excuses to shower alone, just so I wouldn't have to see him undressed. Meanwhile, my best friend Amber was going through a divorce. She dove headfirst into the dating scene, showing me pictures of the guys she was meeting. Fit, stylish, confident men who looked nothing like Franklin. Something inside me snapped. I started going to the gym, buying new clothes, getting my nails done, trying to feel desirable again. Franklin, of course, never complained. If anything, he encouraged it, happy that I was taking care of myself. But the truth, I wasn't doing it for me. I was doing it because every time I saw Franklin, I felt trapped. Then came the summer block party. Franklin, ever the family man, was at the grill laughing, flipping burgers. He wore a polo shirt that clung to every roll on his body. When one of our neighbors jokingly asked if he was expecting, he laughed. But I wanted to disappear. Later that night, he tried to initiate intimacy. I actually gagged. I played it off as food poisoning, but the truth was, I couldn't stand the way his body felt against mine anymore. Amber told me I deserved to feel attracted to my husband, that I wasn't shallow for wanting a physical connection, that it was okay to want passion. And that's when I started going out more. Girls' nights turned into late-night bar hopping. I danced with strangers, flirted with bartenders, let myself remember what wanting someone felt like. Then I'd come home to Franklin, soft, steady, predictable Franklin, waiting up for me with ibuprofen and a glass of water, making sure I was okay. His kindness made me hate him. And I didn't realize it then, but I was already on my way to destroying my marriage. I don't know exactly when the resentment turned into something worse. Maybe it was the night Franklin rubbed my feet after a long shift, and instead of feeling grateful, I felt trapped. Or maybe it was when I saw Amber's new boyfriend, fit, confident, exciting, and realized I'd never felt that way about Franklin. Not even once. I started spending more nights out. What began as casual girls, nights turned into something else. I started wearing dresses that I knew would catch attention, letting strangers buy me drinks, letting my mind wander to places it shouldn't. And then came Ryan. Ryan was everything Franklin wasn't. Tall, muscular, the kind of guy who carried himself with an effortless confidence. He was a regular at the bar where I worked, always flirting, always finding excuses to talk to me, and for the first time in years, I felt something. It started innocently. A little harmless conversation, a few lingering glances. But soon, I was looking forward to seeing him more than I looked forward to going home. I started dressing differently for work, tighter skirts, lower necklines. I'd catch Ryan watching and I liked it. I started staying late, making excuses to avoid going home. And Franklin, he never questioned it. He'd just text to check in, make sure I was safe, and tell me he loved me. I stopped saying it back. One night, after a particularly long shift, Ryan offered to walk me to my car. It was late, the parking lot nearly empty, and for the first time we were alone. "You know," he murmured, leaning against my car, "I don't know why you're still with him." My breath caught. What? He smirked, running a hand through his hair. "Come on, Nicole, a woman like you could have any man you want." I should have walked away. I should have told him he was wrong. But instead, I stood there, my heart pounding in a way it never did with Franklin. Ryan reached out, brushing his fingers down my arm. My skin burned under his touch, and for the first time in years, I felt wanted. I knew I was crossing a line, I knew I was playing with fire, but in that moment I didn't care. Because with Ryan, I didn't have to pretend. I leaned in. And then, my phone buzzed. It was Franklin. "Hey babe, just wanted to check in. Hope you had a good night. Jadon and I made pancakes for dinner. Love you, see you soon." The spell broke instantly. My stomach twisted with something I refused to call guilt. I pulled away from Ryan, mumbling some excuse before practically running to my car. I didn't cross the final line that night. But I wanted to. And that was almost worse. Because the moment I realized, I wanted another man more than my own husband. That was the moment my marriage was truly over. The moment I realized I wanted another man more than my own husband, something shifted inside me. I stopped trying to pretend. I stopped making an effort. And worst of all, I stopped caring if Franklin noticed. For weeks, I kept up my late nights, my lingering conversations with Ryan, my secret thoughts about a life without Franklin. I hadn't physically cheated, not yet, but in every other way I was already gone. And then came Jadon's 7th birthday party. Franklin had been planning it for weeks. A huge pool party in our backyard, a custom Pokemon cake, a rented water slide, the works. He even took a day off to set everything up, running around like a man on a mission, making sure every detail was perfect. I should have appreciated it. But all I could think about was how ridiculous he looked. His polo stretched over his growing belly, his wedding ring digging into his swollen fingers. When the party started, I played my role, smiling for pictures, making small talk with the other moms. But the moment Franklin took off his shirt to get in the pool, I felt sick. His body had changed so much. His chest sagged, his stomach folded over his swim trunks. And the worst part, he was completely oblivious. Some of the other moms exchanged looks. One of them, a fit blonde named Stephanie, even whispered, "Wow, Franklin really let himself go, huh?" I should have defended him. Instead, I laughed. Later that night, after the party wound down and Jadon was asleep, I sat outside drinking wine with Amber. I don't know if it was the alcohol or just years of pent-up frustration, but I started venting. "I've never been attracted to him," I admitted, laughing bitterly. "Not even in the beginning, I just thought it wouldn't matter. That love would grow. But now, I can't even stand to look at him." Amber hesitated. "Nicole, that's rough, but maybe you should keep some of that to yourself." I ignored her, the words just poured out. I have to imagine other people just to get through sex. I only married him because he was good with Jadon. And now, I'm stuck with this soft, pathetic man, and I feel like I'm suffocating. I didn't know that Sarah, one of the school moms, had come back to pick up her kids' forgotten swim goggles. And I definitely didn't know she had overheard everything. 3 days later, at Franklin's sister Jenny's family barbecue, the bomb dropped. I was standing in the backyard when Jenny pulled me aside, her face unreadable. "So," she said, swirling her drink, "I heard some interesting things about how you really feel about my brother." My stomach dropped. "What?" She tilted her head. "Sarah told me what you said at the party, about how you never loved him, how you have to imagine other men in bed, how you laughed about it." My blood went cold. I was venting," I stammered. "I didn't mean." But before I could finish, I heard a noise behind me. I turned. And there was Franklin, standing in the doorway, holding a plate of leftover potato salad, having heard every single word. The look on his face, God, I'll never forget it. He didn't yell, he didn't throw anything, he didn't even get angry. He just set the plate down so carefully, like he was moving in slow motion. Then he walked to his car without saying a single word. I chased after him. "Franklin, wait, you're taking this all wrong." He stopped, his hand on the car door. I panicked. "I picked you because you were a good man, because you're a great father. Doesn't that count for something?" He let out a short, humorless laugh. "You didn't pick me," he said quietly. "You picked a lifestyle, you picked security, but you never picked me." Then he got in his car and drove away. And just like that, the foundation I had built my entire life on, it crumbled beneath my feet. For 3 days, Franklin didn't come home. He still showed up to take Jadon to school and t-ball practice, but he never came inside. He wouldn't answer my calls, barely responded to my texts. The only thing he cared about now was Jadon. I told myself he just needed time to cool off, that he'd realize I was right, that plenty of people marry for security over passion, and we could figure things out. But on the fourth night he came home, and everything changed. I had been rehearsing my speech all day, about how marriage is complicated, about how I chose him because he was a good man, a good father. I even Googled articles on arranged marriages, ready to argue that attraction wasn't everything. But when Franklin walked in, calm and composed, wearing a shirt I'd never seen before, my stomach twisted. Something felt off. He sat at the kitchen table, folded his hands, and just looked at me. I started rambling. "You have to understand," I said desperately. "I picked you over better-looking guys because I knew you'd be a good husband, a good father." He cut me off. "Nicole," he said quietly, "all those times we were intimate, were you thinking about other men?" I froze. He just watched me, the same way he watched Jadon when he was waiting for him to admit he'd done something wrong. Patient, calm, unshakable. And suddenly, I was furious. Who was he to make me feel guilty? Hadn't I given him years of my life? Hadn't I let him adopt my son? Hadn't I played the role of the perfect wife, even when I felt nothing? So I snapped. You want the truth? I spat. Fine, yes, sometimes I thought about other men. Sometimes I just closed my eyes and got it over with. But I still chose you, I still stayed. Doesn't that count for something? Franklin didn't yell, didn't break anything, didn't cry. He just nodded, slowly, like he had finally gotten the answer he had been dreading all along. Then he slid a folder across the table. I need you to stay with Amber for a while, he said quietly. My lawyer drew up separation papers. We'll figure out Jadden's schedule later. My heart stopped. Are you serious? I laughed, but it came out hollow. You're throwing away our marriage just because I admitted I'm not physically attracted to you. Most men would kill to have a wife who chose them for their character. Franklin stood up. His voice cracked just a little when he said, I'm not most men, and most men would kill to have a wife who actually loved them. Then he turned to go upstairs, but before he did, he paused. You know what the saddest part is, he said, not even looking at me. I keep thinking about all those times you seemed so passionate, so into it, and now I know that wasn't me you were thinking about. I opened my mouth to lie, to soften the blow. But then he held up a hand. Actually, don't answer that, he whispered. I don't think I can handle any more honesty from you tonight. Then he walked away. And for the first time, I realized I might have actually lost him. I thought Franklin would come to his senses. I told myself he was just hurt, that after a few days, he'd realize what he was losing, that he'd remember all the good things, how I had given him a family, how I had chosen him when other women wouldn't have. But Franklin, he wasn't playing the game I thought he was. While I was posting cryptic quotes about growth and speaking your truth on social media, he was dismantling our life together, quietly, methodically, and completely. First, I got a notification that he had removed me from our joint credit cards. Then, I found out he had already separated our bank accounts. He had been documenting everything, my late nights, my spending habits, even my own words. Every time I had admitted to using him for stability, to faking attraction, to imagining other men, he had kept a record. When I called the bank, furious, they told me Franklin had already been there that morning. And the worst part, he wasn't angry. He was just done. Then came Jadden. At first, Franklin never spoke badly about me in front of our son. He kept up their traditions, pancakes on Saturdays, bedtime stories, helping with school projects. But Jadden wasn't stupid. One morning, he looked up at me with those same patient, steady eyes his dad had and asked, Mommy, why did you make Daddy Frank sad? I had no idea what to say. I told myself I still had time to fix things, that maybe if I suggested couples therapy, Franklin would reconsider, that we could work something out for Jadden's sake. So I tried. I texted Franklin, telling him we could try again, that we could make it work. He didn't even argue. He just responded, Nicole, you keep using Jadden as a reason we should stay together, but you never once say you love me, just like when we got married. That was the moment I realized I had already lost him. At first, I didn't care. I told myself he wasn't the type to date again quickly. But then I saw her. Rachel. The children's librarian. Sweet, responsible, the kind of woman who actually appreciated Franklin. The kind of woman who wanted him. Jadden adored her. He came home one weekend talking about how Miss Rachel had helped him with a science project, how Franklin and Rachel had taken him to the museum. And then I saw the pictures. Franklin, Jadden, and Rachel, laughing at the zoo, smiling at a game night with Franklin's family. And the worst one. A beach photo. Franklin shirtless, confident, fit. All the things I used to resent about him, the belly, the man boobs, the outdated clothes were gone. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to scream that it wasn't fair. But the truth. Franklin had been a good man all along. I had just been too shallow to appreciate it. And now, I was living in my childhood bedroom, working doubles just to afford my car payments. My friends had distanced themselves. Even Amber, who had once encouraged me, finally admitted. You didn't just lose a meal ticket. You lost a good man, and now someone else is loving him the way you never could. I looked at the old wedding photos. Before I became obsessed with his weight, before I let my selfishness ruin everything. And for the first time, I realized. Sometimes the truth isn't empowering. Sometimes the truth destroys everything. And I had no one to blame but myself. What do you think? Did Nicole deserve what happened to her, or was she just being honest about her feelings? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more shocking tales of love, betrayal, and regret. Trust me, you won't believe what's coming next.